even if you froze current model capabilities,
Yeah.
are still like single-digit percentage in terms of use cases that have been
Wow.
extrapolated. And I think that's partly because it is a new way of interacting.
Mm,
And also, I think like with any sort of new technology paradigm or shift,
mm.
the way that people typically approach it is they like take an old problem and try to like
Yeah.
apply it to the new
Oh,
model.
yeah, yeah.
And that works sometimes,
Yeah.
and that's great. But that's, that's we're kind of like operating from our like historical mental model.
Yeah.
But once you start to actually use the technology and interact with it and kind of
Yeah.
go back and forth, you
Right.
realize that it's good at new and different things.
Yeah.
And then you're like, your brain starts to shift, and like now you can't even
Yeah.
think of a problem without thinking about how I'm going to
Yeah.
solve it.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by TestBox. Zach, it's great to see you, man.
James, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think of anyone I've interviewed on the interview series, I haven't known them as long as I've known you.
Yeah,
right?
it's been years.
It's been years. I tell people all the time that the reason Pre-Sales Collective exists is because of you. So I probably should have paid you a royalty.
Yeah, well,
Sorry
thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I've always enjoyed having conversations with you about solutions and go-to-market in the future. And I think you've always had a great point of view that is rooted in fact and tactical, but also being strategic. And so I'm super excited for us to dig into a lot of these topics today.
Likewise, man. Great to be here.
So let's talk about you. Like, tell us a little bit about, where you're at today and what got you to where you are.
Ooh, the whole thing?
Give us a little bit. Give us cliff notes on the logos. I think the logos are always, impactful at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, I've been doing this for 25 years. Literally.
Yeah. Wow.
Like started my career long ago. I was in college, started a company.
Yeah.
It was sort of like solutions adjacent, where I was basically straddling the tech and the business world and managed some developers to build an application for home contractors.
Wow.
And it was a CRM. I didn't even know what a CRM was, so we just called it like a lead management tool.
Yeah.
And basically like it would funnel pay-per-click leads into a PHP app.
Yeah.
And then we'd go sell subscriptions to home contractors.
Wow.
It was a like financial failure. I learned a ton. Didn't know anything about like raising money, market size was, but it was just a great experience with friends. But that's where I really learned that I love both the business and technology space.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I was in San Francisco. I discovered this company called Salesforce.com, like literally stumbled in. And that's where I got my first SE job.
Amazing.
And that was like 2005. And I've worked at, Salesforce, where I really learned the art of value selling.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a very unique experience there. And, got to ride the tide of software as a service, convincing people of a new paradigm. And then, I went to a couple startups, company called Box, which is my first like SE leader experience.
Yeah.
And, for better or worse, I've never been able to escape the solutions profession. I think it's the best job in the world.
Yeah,
it
is.
And because of the reasons I've described, like you get to be close to technology, you get to close to the business. You've got like the validation where you close a deal or you're close to a deal that's closed. And it feels really good. And also you get to stay at the cutting edge of what's happening. And so I've always like essentially just tried to optimize my career to be at the place where I think like has the most potential to drive value for customers.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's amazing, because I think you were at Rippling during Rippling's run, and then now you're at OpenAI, and I feel like you were one of the first folks who was like making the leap over to OpenAI, and there's been a plethora of people that have been hired since you joined.
I mean, there certainly are people that did a lot of the harder work earlier on, like find OpenAI before there was even ChatGPT, which is wild. But yeah, and when I joined, my SE team was about 5 people, or bordering on 50. So we've seen a ton of growth in the last year. I've been there for like a year and change.
Yeah.
Rippling was also hard to leave, and that's still but I'm also on the cutting edge of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, OpenAI has been a wild ride.
Yeah. When you told me you were going to OpenAI, I was like, that is the most perfect company for you to work at, right? Like, I just feel like that was like, oh, that's where Zach's supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really proud to be there. And I think the reason I joined is because I was using ChatGPT at Rippling.
Yeah.
And this was like 3.5 days, right? Like I realized the early impact a tool like that could have. And I just said, I've got to work at that company.
Yeah.
Or around that company.
Yeah.
If I didn't get this job, I would have, thought about new ways to use technology in other ways, of course, or other applications. But and you think about like where that tech was, where ChatGPT was a year ago, it's a fundamentally different product.
It's insane.
And the intelligence has gone from like a high school intern to like a PhD level professor in any disciplines.
I mean, the rate of innovation and the pace of innovation is just unbelievable, right? Because even like I was thinking about my interview series like 6 months ago, the conversation was very different than where it is now.
It's true.
And if I think about 6 months from now, like, man, I'm like nervous to see like where this is going to go. And because I'm going to have conversation that are, hey, let's talk about what's coming and like get ahead of it. But it's moving so fast.
We feel that as well.
Yeah, I bet.
That's the hardest part of our job is like, we don't have a ton of like insight into what's coming 6 months from now.
Yeah.
And then sort of anticipate like thematically where things are going. But I think it's widely known that as soon as something is ready and is safe and has been vetted by our internal teams, then we try to get it out as soon as possible because we want to make sure that most people can benefit from it. And frankly, so that we can learn. Yeah. This is like every time we're making a release, that's something that the world has never seen before.
That's unbelievable.
And never interacted with before. And so we learn a lot from how people interact with it. And that goes into like how we think about what the business applications can be as well.
So one of the things that you just said in your intro is that you were using ChatGPT and you were like, I have to go work at this company. So like, what was the aha moment for you to be like, this is going to revolutionize software?
For me, it was that it just felt like a very unique and natural way to interact with technology. Like the sort of natural language interface is something that I had never experienced before. And its ability to, at the time, like what it was really good at was like text summarization. Or, helping you take, an input and import it to an ideal output of sorts. And I'm, vastly oversimplifying it. But, that to me was just the most, these are tasks that would have taken me months to complete. Huge projects, assembling slide decks, creating documents, like simple stuff. It seems simple now. But I could literally give somebody a task in the past and say, like, hey, I need you to create a competitive documentation. Can you do it in 3 weeks? And
crazy.
And that would be totally reasonable. And now it's like, can you get it by the end of the week and at least get a first draft and we can iterate on it? And the quality is much, much higher than you would previously. And so I saw that firsthand. And it's actually one of the exercises that we went through at Rippling was like, we had this massive market. A lot of competitors. We had to analyze all of this like text data and using ChatGPT as a way to organize that in a cohesive way was like mind blowing for me. And I think like if it can do really well at this, there's so many other knowledge work applications as well.
It's a perfect example. And I think one of the things that I want to dig into, right, is that, you've been giving some presentations recently that this shift is different, right? And, saying you've been part of tech for 25 years, you've seen a couple of different shifts. So I want to know why you think this is so fundamentally different.
Because I think it is fundamentally changing the way we work. I mean, people have used that sort of tagline in the past as productivity software.
Sure.
There is a lot of productivity software that has accelerated productivity or your ability to complete a task. But now the way that you interact with a computer is completely different. And now the way that you think about accomplishing a task has to be completely different. You have to change your mental model. And it also like something that I like started to think about a lot recently is that it is an excellent way to see around corners. Like in the past, even like earlier models, like AI was very good at like, if you knew what to put in and you sort of, you were an expert in the potential outcomes. It would still accelerate your work, but now you can use it because it has access to all this intelligence as a way to see around corners or identify gaps that you may have had, or even just to like help you surface bias that you may not have been aware of, as an example. And I think like that's really cool and valuable, but it takes some work to learn how to use the technology in a way to actually get that output. And it also takes education for folks that have been in a job that they've been doing the same way for years and years and years. To shift the way they approach work.
And I want to dig into that, right? Because one of the things that you had said prior to us starting this interview, right, is like, people earlier in their career and later in their career really need to adopt and utilize this technology. So for example, for better or worse in my personal life, when my daughter asked me a question about something, I'm like, did you ask ChatGPT first? Right?
Yeah, there you go.
I'm like, did you ask ChatGPT? And then my brother...
Smarter than you is what you're saying.
Yeah, it is. It totally is. I mean, I'll give my bias to the answer that I want her to hear. But, like my dad or my brother will ask me a question and I was like, did you ask ChatGPT first? Right. Because neither of them are in software. They're in like, skilled labor jobs, and it's just very different. And so I think we work in tech. And so like, we obviously use this stuff all day, every day, but there's a whole consortium of people who are not touching this technology. Right.
Yeah. I mean, knowledge is a consistent, a constant throughout any job. I mean, any job you can think of. knowledge worker or otherwise, like they are in that role because they have some sort of specialized expertise, right? And as example, I'm working with a company that is building a mobile app for auto technicians.
Yeah.
They have like this vast trove of data of like all of these old school manuals that, a wide variety of cars that come through, not all of it's digitized, but natural language is the optimal way to interact with that data. And, these are folks that like, it's on a mobile phone. So it's very like friendly platform interface.
Yeah.
And it's accelerated their productivity. And the way you think about like, there's some real ROI that you can get as well, but it can apply to anything. My sister is a teacher, and she's thinking about like new and creative ways to expose this technology to her class of middle schoolers.
Yeah.
And you have to be, careful is the wrong word, but I think you have to like take the right approach so that it can't be a supplement necessarily to learning, but it helps augment the process.
Yeah. I think augment's the key right word, right? And I think the example you just gave on the car situation, right, is that even for me, I bought a car and I used ChatGPT to help educate myself on this.
Yeah.
And in my spare time, a fun hobby of mine is this racing with $500 cars called 24 Hours of Lemons.
Oh, nice. I saw the Saturn, right?
Yeah, the Saturn. I mean, 1996 Saturn SC2,
That's
right?
awesome. Yeah.
But what's happening is like we're looking at a different car, and I used O3 to do all of my research. I mean, the treasure trove of research I was able to find was on one of the cars I was looking at. It was like, this model year will have this problem with your engine at like 5 or 6 hours. It will likely explode because of this known issue. And the information I was able to learn on this has just blown my mind. Like,
actually life-saving.
Potentially life-saving, right? It's like, I was thinking about a version of a car and didn't realize that like a base, Porsche 944, which is like well-known in some of these like racing endurance, that a certain year actually overheats and tends to explode, right? The engines can explode. But I found that out through ChatGPT. I didn't find it out through any of the message boards. I didn't find that through any search. And I think to me, it just wows me every day at like how powerful this technology is. And one of the things I've been saying is like information has become a commodity, right? Like I could just go on and ask almost anything and to educate and learn. And it just blows my mind.
I would challenge though that. Perhaps that statement, like information, still important.
Yes.
Like we need to continue to collect data.
Sure.
And even like the outcomes of your new interactions with AI, I would say intelligence now is a commodity.
Wow. That's an interesting call out.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, because you really like what you're saying is like, the fact that you have access to somebody that's really, really smart. Now they also may not have, like, there are a lot of companies that have, private data sources.
Sure.
And as an example, we talk to a lot of customers that want to take, deep research.
Yeah.
But they don't want it on the public internet. Like they want that reasoning over their own data.
100%.
And then the intelligence is really what's going to plug into the valuable information that you have.
Well, okay. And so good call out. I like that. And I want to talk about using that, right? Because you talked about using deep research and using it internally. Like we've been testing some things at TestBox as well. And TestBox was built with AI, right? Like we're doing synthetic data. And so like we're living and breathing that all the time. But one of the things that I've learned from you is like, how does OpenAI use OpenAI, ChatGPT, and it sounds like the automation you all have in your go-to-market motion and the rigor is fairly insane.
Yeah. I mean, it's we call ourselves AI native sellers.
Yeah.
And I think like if you're going to position the value of these products or services to customers, of course you should be AI native.
You should, right?
Yourself. And part of that is like thinking about ways to integrate it throughout your entire process. It doesn't matter, what customer professional you are, customer facing professional you are. Of course, that starts with, and one of the best use cases is learning more about your customers, but also learning more about like, AI is complicated and every implementation, especially on top of our API, can be a bespoke implementation in a bespoke environment. And it's an excellent mechanism to familiarize yourself with the customer situation, both in terms of what they do as a business, but also their technical landscape. And it's a skill leveler. I mean, it reduces the learning curve so significantly that when you go into a particular customer, like it's mandatory that you have done a deep research report on them and their industry, which can be very comprehensive. But then you take that the step further and you say, okay, based on this, like, here's what I know about their architecture. What other questions should I ask? And we volunteer it, right? I mean, we should be very forward. I think everybody should to say like, I used ChatGPT for this, which is fine. And then you start to have a dialogue around it and expose the tool as a tool in your tool belt.
Yeah. I mean, I think the deep research aspect of things has really just blown my mind, right? Because we have been mandating deep research on all of our sales calls as well. And the things that we have learned through running deep research, we've presented to some executives and they're like, the situation better than we have. I mean, that to me, that blew my mind. Like how, if I want my sales team and the solutions team to have credibility and gain a point of view, it's like it's a non-starter for me. I have to use this to like get their attention and the respect and be like, oh, wow, you all did your homework. I think that's been the craziest thing for me.
I agree. Yeah. I remember a story to a CEO that will remain unnamed. We gave him a deep research report as he was leaving one of our events. And he responded to one of our executives and said, holy SHIT, you spell it out. It doesn't matter. Holy shit. I can't believe like the level of detail here.
Yeah.
I've got a whole team that spends weeks doing this for me.
Unbelievable.
And it's obviously sensitive because we're talking about like people's jobs here.
Yeah.
But I think like on the flip side, those sort of people that were doing those reports and spending weeks producing one report, can you use deep research as a way to like serve as a catalyst for many different reports?
Sure.
And then use that to extrapolate new insights in a way that would just accelerate their work over time.
Yeah. It's a great call. And actually, I was prepping for a conversation with the executive last week. And I asked ChatGPT, like, what are this person's motivations and their interests? And it pulled from their LinkedIn post and was like, this is what they've been talking about on LinkedIn. And I was like, wow, I did not know it was pulling LinkedIn data and it was going to pull out specific quotes on what this person posted. And I actually sent it to this person. I was like, is this right? And he's like, wow, that is extremely accurate.
Yeah, it's wild. Where it gets real meta is if you ask it about yourself.
I have done some things about myself. I will be honest that when you ask it about yourself and then you pitch like an idea, and it almost like builds you up too much. It's like, well, because you're James Kakis and you did this, this, and this would be a great, business for you to invest in because of.
Yeah.
I always feel like it's too nice to me. It's too polite.
We're working on that.
No, James, stop. Yeah.
I mean, you could prompt it too. I think it generally, generally speaking, wants to do a good job.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, again, another simplification. But if you give the right instructions to say, like, I need you to give me critical feedback. I want pros, cons, where I can get better.
Yeah.
As an example, like I used like some of my history to just say, like, where do you think I may have insecurities? Like, there are areas where I need to develop personally. Ooh. And it was
really,
yeah. I mean, it's like, maybe you should stop shifting so many AI topics. Like just lean into one area.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I mean, of course, like it only has context from your ChatGPT conversations, but anyway, the possibilities are limitless. And I think we're really just scratching the surface.
Yeah. Do you have a point of view, a general personal point of view of like why we're just scratching the surface and like what is going to be possible?
I think like even if you froze current model capabilities, there are still like single-digit percentage in terms of use cases that have been extrapolated. And I think that's partly because it is a new way of interacting. And also I think like with any sort of new technology paradigm or shift, the way that people typically approach it is they like take an old problem and try to apply it to the new model. And that works sometimes and that's great. But that's, that's we're kind of like operating from our like historical mental model.
Yeah.
But once you start to actually use the technology and interact with it and kind of go back and forth, you realize that it's good at new and different things.
Yeah.
And then you're like, your brain starts to shift and like now you can't even think of a problem without thinking about how I'm going to solve it.
Yeah.
So
how does this change software over the next couple of years? Big question. I know.
Yeah. I mean, I think like you zoom out, like what is software really? Like, like the value of software was like domain expertise, technical expertise and sweat equity, time and put into developing a like working piece of technology.
Yeah.
And then typically it was some sort of like series of problems that you could solve and you could uniquely solve relative to your competitors. So effectively you're outpacing competitors based on like how quickly you can go to market and how many more problems that you can solve for customers. But now that you can prototype something out in 10 minutes, I mean you can get a lot more ideas out there.
Yeah,
I would say like maybe a different way to look at this is like software I think will continue to be a thing.
Okay,
but the amount of problems that software can solve for people, it would be really good for customers.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be harder for software companies.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Great for customers in the sense that if I'm a customer and I want my software suite to solve a particular problem, I can either build it on my own or just go to the software vendor and say, like, hey, here's the problem I want you to solve, and I know that you can develop it quickly. So rapidly, you're developing new features.
Sure,
and bringing more value to customers than ever before. Whereas like the old model, And I was at Salesforce for a long time, at quarterly release cycles. So we have this big build up, we get customer feedback, and then we say, congratulations, customers, you get one release every 3 months.
Right.
And now everybody's releasing things on a daily basis. We're releasing new technology on a weekly basis, quite literally.
Wow.
And so who's that good for? That's really good for customers.
Right.
It makes it harder for software companies and technology companies because they have to keep up with that pace. But the technology enables that sustained pace. So that's where I think it's kind of like it balances out, right? There's no really, there's no supply side problem with work, especially in software. Work will continue to build, and problems will continue to build. And this just accelerates the execution against those problems, I would say.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think one of the things that, has been top of mind for me are like how the roles of go-to-market teams or organizations change in this world, right? I think you called it AI native sellers, right? Like, what is the profile of the seller in your business today, and how is it different than what, would have been 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, at the base level, I would say like even if in like the traditional like role structure, we have like sales development, sales team, SE, post sales, even in that traditional structure, which it still exists in many companies, those folks are now enabled with like a whole new set of intelligence tools. And so they can do a lot, deeper customer research. There's no excuse to show up to a meeting not knowing what the customer does, or the problems that you can solve with them, or even what the agenda the meeting should be, because you can do that all in like a minute and a half.
It's crazy.
And so that I think is like, that is the floor, right? In terms of what like I would expect from anybody in a customer facing roles, that you'd be using those tools every single day and every single interaction. And then as people become more comfortable and familiar with using these tools, they realize like my job sort of changes. Like I don't need to spend 2 weeks preparing for this meeting, but the work doesn't go away. What you can do is now handle more meetings with the same amount of time. That the quality of interaction goes up.
Yeah, totally.
And then I think, as that technology or those processes that you discover that are really valuable, start to rise to the surface. Then you learn how to automate those. And that's where like this, like people call 2025 the year of agents. And I think that's true. Like we're starting to see some of that use cases. Using agents to execute on those new processes or jobs. Then I think what happens is, and I've already started to see it happen, is like the role of whatever role you are, if it's like, let's say a sales development person versus a salesperson or a post salesperson, or even those roles are merged, they learn to manage the agents as they would manage software historically.
Wow.
So it's doing things for you. It is an example, if you're managing your inbound sales process. That's a good play for agents.
Totally.
Receive emails, process those emails, determine the quality of the leads, and just show up an alert, whatever your surface is, Slack or otherwise. And this is, James, here's a quality lead for you. What do you want to do with it? And you say like, looks good to me. Let's send them an email. Boom, email sent. You're just starting to abstract away some of like the trivial toil from the job. So you can be more strategic, and you're actually managing your own team of folks that is working for you.
It's incredible. And I think at the end of the day, like, people complain in software about all the mundane tasks that we have to do, right? There's so much mundane, tedious work that's repetitive. Like it's about time that there's a lot more efficiency and productivity in this whole thing. And so I'm curious, right? Like, how does that change the role of solutions, like for your business especially, right? Like how has your thought process changed about what that role of the solutions professional should be?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think what is our job about, really? Like, how would you define an SE?
The job is to be I always lead with customer centric problem solver, right? And at the end of the day, your job is to articulate and deliver value of what your solution should provide. Right.
Yeah. And I'm like, that resonates with me for sure. And I think like historically you'd have to bring somebody in that had deep expertise in something. Right. Because there's a division of labor. And the AD can't be a deep expert in everything. And there's also like the team or human dynamic where as a customer, the person who's asking for the contract, it's not the same person you want asking technical questions.
Right.
So there's something to that, of course. And it's paid off given software margins. Right. But the reality of it is like, I think there's two things. One, I think there'll be a lot more technical sales reps.
Agree.
Because access to intelligence is there.
Totally.
So you don't need somebody sitting on your shoulder the entire time. And the second is like for companies that can justify it and at the right scale, like SEs still are a really critical resource. You still need technical depth, even if the access to intelligence is there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
still need somebody who can make sense of it all.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The sense making.
And we're not quite there to have like, an avatar
Totally.
to facilitate that entire process
Yeah.
and think strategically. Right. And so like these tools become an invaluable and essential
Yeah.
tool or mechanism to accommodate and accentuate your sales process, really.
Yeah. And I guess the question is like, what is a sales process, right? Like one of the things that I've told people is like, I just don't love this concept of pre and post sale, right? Because it's actually a fallacy, right? Because sales and revenue and customer success are an evergreen motion, right? You're either selling a value, you're selling an expansion, you're selling a renewal. And so like, how do you think that concept plays, in this, what's maybe a shift that's happening in software?
I agree with that. I mean, I think like, customer success, the success of a customer,
Yeah.
not the function.
Yeah. Yeah.
The success of a customer is the most important thing, obviously.
Sure.
And I think like the reason they had, the traditional division of labor is just, it was exactly that. Is like, I need somebody to focus on getting us new accounts.
Yep.
And if they're doing that, they can't spend all their time successing the existing accounts. So in some instances, like perhaps the division labor makes sense. Although you've seen the models work really well where you have like one person who just owns that account.
Right.
Life cycle. And we have both of those actually.
Yeah. So you have both.
Okay. And mostly life cycle. Like everybody has like a stake in making sure that the customer is successful.
Great.
So the tool, I mean, I think like broadly speaking, like these tools are going to help accelerate a lot of that because you get customer insights, which are essential to that.
Yeah.
So you can scale across, right?
Yeah.
If it's instrumented into whatever tool or service you're selling, you also have insights into like how healthy the customer is.
Right.
And surface alerts and in fact, like these agents should be able to interact with customers on your behalf.
Yeah. Help you prioritize like who you're spending and why you're spending the time. Right?
Yeah. Like most people don't even care. Maybe this is controversial, but I think most being a customer of software, you're not necessarily looking forward to a QBR with your vendor, right?
If it goes by how most companies do the traditional QBR, come on.
I mean, like candidly, like if it's somebody who doesn't know those like 50% of your business, doesn't have a ton of insights, is not offering any value, then you don't want to show up for that meeting. So you can like organize and deliver that information in a way that's meaningful.
Yes.
And then allow the customer to sort of tap in on that.
Totally.
And it's all about offering insights that are valuable.
Yeah.
And delivering value both pre and post sales in the traditional sense.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've always thought about is like, how do you make the typical customer success function automated, right? And it's like, why do I need to get on a weekly or bi-weekly call to hear how things are going or to get some update because you're just trying to justify, keeping us top of mind? Like, why can't your product, why can't the automation do that for you?
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of the full life cycle because you build so much trust in a pre-sale process, right? Or the sales process. I always joke, you spend time away from your family, you're wining and dining, you're traveling on a plane, and all of a sudden the deal signs and you disappear, right? Like, come on, like it's just. And I think with the commoditization of technology, everyone moving to platforms like. Salesforce has shown in some of their studies, like people buy on the experience. And I think a lot of these software platforms, you're talking about Olympic level margins in the differences, right? And like sometimes like no one wants to acknowledge this. It does come down to a feature, right? You might pick a product because of features. And if you've built that trust, you've built that continuity, you can really set them up for success. You're accountable for their value delivery. And then the upsell, the expansion, the renewal comes a lot easier. In my opinion.
I mean, like all those insights, ultimately, I'm not a prolific buyer of software.
Sure.
I've done it a couple of times.
Sure.
And it's not easy to do.
No,
it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Frankly, especially if you have a full-time job doing something else.
Yeah.
And ultimately you just want insights that are going to help you do your job better.
Right.
People lose sight of that.
Yes.
Often.
Totally.
And right away when somebody's showing up for their own benefit.
Yeah. I think that's very fair.
And if they're pushy or they're like, I just want to, let me show you this thing because I'm going to eventually sell you a thing.
Yeah.
Just tell me something I don't know.
Right.
Provide a unique insight that is relative to my job.
Yep.
And that's the challenge historically is it's difficult to do that at scale unless you have like a traditional discovery call or you get some time with somebody. But now you can do that.
You totally can.
Actually provides real value.
Yeah. I love that. I think we could spend a ton of time talking about that. But I want to talk about a topic that you and I have been talking about offline.
Sure.
Quite frequently. And I want to talk pricing in the AI world, right? I want to talk about your point of view on consumption-based pricing. And let's start there. Like, what's your point of view on consumption-based pricing?
I think it works really well.
Okay.
For API. Yeah. I mean, like, I think, what it does is it makes it very easy for customers to test use cases.
Yep.
And to test like the application of any technology that offers that pricing model.
Mm-hmm.
It also helps is I think the most logical way to do it, especially for the long tail of the market.
Yeah.
We're a company like ours, we don't have enough people to talk to all of the customers.
Sure.
So there has to be a scale approach there. And then it enables a wide variety of self-service customers to go on and say, I'm just going to pay for what I use.
Yeah.
And, we give them mechanisms to determine like how much it's going to cost them as they
Right.
continue to scale. So it works really well there. The challenge is that it is not necessarily, doesn't directly correlate to customer value. So you're paying for tokens, obviously, and some models are more expensive than others. They continue to get cheaper over time. Like, first take like the customer approach. I think it's really good for customers. Like it's becoming even better for customers as technology becomes cheaper.
Yeah.
Even as it becomes more intelligent. The challenge is like when they want more traditional human resources to support them. And there's like a gap in the world today. Like there aren't a ton of folks that have implemented successful AI projects.
Sure.
Right. So like they want to work with the folks that have been closer to the most successful implementations, like folks on my team. And of course, in order for us to resource those customers, there has to be some mutual exchange of value there.
Yeah.
And historically, that was predicated on, how many tokens are they going to consume?
Yeah.
It's a big project, and we can put big resources on that project. But the challenge of that model is that we didn't get to pay close enough attention to some really high value use cases for customers.
Okay.
And so like, there are many like super impactful low token consumption use cases that folks have across a wide variety of industries or businesses. And those are tough to resource from an SE perspective.
Sure.
So we're trying to rethink this. And so that's why I think like there are interesting ways to approach like milestone based pricing.
Yeah. Okay.
It's challenging because like those goalposts move.
They do.
It is like ideologically something that is really attractive.
Yeah.
Both the company and the customer.
Yeah.
But I still don't see what happens at the end of a year when you've achieved those milestones outcomes. And do you can continue to move those goalposts?
Sure.
It's easier to do for something like customer service where you can say like, we're going to abstract away a number of tickets.
Right.
But think about like other vertical use cases. I think you just have to be like really careful and really smart about determining like what those outcomes should be across your customer base.
Yeah. Cause you went to outcomes that I wanted to go to next, right? I was like, we've been talking consumption-based pricing, right? Like as you go from consumption-based, the conversation obviously goes to milestone and outcome-based. And so I guess like your general thesis is that outcome-based pricing is unproven at this point. Like, is that,
Yeah.
And then,
that's not to say that's not a sweeping statement there. I think there's some companies, particularly in the customer service space, that have figured it out because it's very easy to align on with the target customer.
Well, but let's dig in on that a little bit, right? Because that has come up in conversations. Like, why does it seem that outcome-based pricing in like the customer support world has gained so much traction?
Because I think the application of even the newest technology is working to achieve a very similar results as old, I would say old, but I would say historical customer service applications or software suites. So when I was selling Service Cloud back in the day, this is like what, 2008, 2009.
Okay.
The metrics are very similar, right? There's like, case deflection, time to resolve. And those are the similar metrics that you would look to impact. Even with an AI voice agent, for example. And so I think it's easy probably is the wrong word, but I think it is tangible and easy to understand or even logical for a company to go to a customer and say, like, what are your targets in these areas? And let's help you achieve 20% reduction in those targets. Or you have a very specific target for like the number of tickets that you want humans to resolve versus the AI. And if you just maintain that, then you can correlate that to value a lot easier.
Sure. Okay. So it gets me thinking, right? It's like, we've seen some success in the customer support, but like, why is outcome-based pricing facing an uphill battle in anything outside of that primary use case?
And again, it's very early days, but I think I can continue to go back to the idea that like the goalposts will move.
Yeah.
Right.
Give me like another tactical or tangible.
If you have like a sales automation application,
Sure. Yep.
and the outcomes delivered are like 20% better conversion on your sales funnel. Is that persistent 20% conversion improvement? And then like the next year, you just want to maintain that. Every company is always looking to improve. So even in the old days of software, even there was no outcomes-based pricing, but the ROI models were predicated on like a particular ROI for the first year. But then, then you've established a new baseline, and you want to continue to move that up or down depending on, your objectives. And that's where I don't see it. It doesn't quite like connect for me and how that actually is going to resolve itself.
Yeah. I think it's super interesting, and I appreciate you sharing that perspective because, I'm trying to stay on bleeding edge of like, consumption base, milestone, outcome, but I'm just really uncertain how you build a predictable business in this world.
That's the thing for me too, is I think it is really good for customers, and that's why it's attractive. Like we should move towards how do you optimize for the most value for the customer so it makes sense for them. I don't quite know how we operationalize that. Because that also is not good for customers if like you're renegotiating a contract and you have 100 bespoke contracts. It's going to be annoying for them to have
100%
renegotiate every year, and they also want to predict their costs over time. And especially as you move up market, like they need predictable costs. They need to know it's 1, 2, 3 years, and it can't be. And frankly, in limited experience, even the history is short for this sort of concept. It's mostly been on the customer who was not up for it.
Oh yeah, because they can't put it in their budget. They can't, can't hit them with a 40% increase quarter over quarter or year over year. They're like,
how do they look at it from their end? Like, how do we determine like at the end of 6 months and in a year that we actually achieved our outcomes? And again, that's why I think in customer service it might be easier because all those systems are well instrumented, and the solution you're selling is built right in. So you have the data right in front of you as do they, and you can see the number of tickets.
And I appreciate that articulation because like it makes sense, right? Like we've been selling, overselling. We haven't delivered value as a software profession for a long time, right? So, the pendulum has swung to the customers, but at the same time, like how do you build a business that has employees that service customers effectively without burning cash and burning through capital? And I think that's the biggest challenge and what I'm trying to keep my pulse on, because I do love this shift to the customer and the power to the customer, because it's like you have to be accountable at the end of the day, right? Whatever you're selling, you have to be accountable finally. But at the same time, my whole thesis, even at TestBox right now, is like we're experimenting with some consumption-based pricing because we see the value of it, right? But at the same time, our buyers are used to buying on seat basis, right? And when I try to introduce some sort of new model, they're a little bit afraid of like, where's the predictability? What's going to shift? What's going to change? And I think in like the tokens and the, the AI, the API calls, like that seems to make a lot of sense. But in some of these other applications, I'm just not convinced that it's going to be super straightforward. And there will be some testing and there will be some, failing that some people go through. But I'm just like really interested to see how there's predictability, how customers are okay with it, but ultimately how we have software that actually delivers the value that it said it would.
I mean, people have said this, and this is certainly requires some evolution, but like what is the price you'll pay to solve the problem? And there should be like a fair exchange of value. And that's what pricing is all about, right? It's easier said than done, of course, as well. I really like, at Slack, we had this fair use pricing, meaning people only paid for what they were using. I think that worked really well, and it forced us to communicate, drive the value and activation. We have a similar concept for ChatGPT, which is like consumption-based pricing. So depending on what you're using, you'll consume X amount of credits. And I think that is attractive to folks to make sure they get the intelligence in the hands of everyone. And then it's up to us and them to help proliferate the value.
Agreed. Zach, I feel like I can sit here and talk to you about these topics all day long, right? It's just super interesting, right? And I think that, what I've always applauded and I've mentioned about you is that you're always on the cutting edge. You're always thinking forward and strategic. And so I think maybe one question I want to leave you with is like, I won't go too far into the future, right? But, 2 or 3 years from now, what do you see a fundamental shift in something that we haven't talked about today as it relates to go-to-market motions, org structures, or just how companies operate in general?
I think you'll see a lot of successful companies that are a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a new concept. You've heard it
Right.
in many different podcasts.
Yeah.
Like the people are looking for the first like 10-person unicorn with $1 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
Or I guess $1 billion revenue, 10-person. I think that's totally feasible.
You think it's feasible?
Yeah, I think people will get really good at managing agents.
Yeah.
Abstracting away a lot of like the operational overhead and these like redundant toil as they have as part of their day-to-day and operations. And you can build a really successful business with a smaller amount of people.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm really interested to see how that changes things. And, some of the things I've been telling some people is like, revenue per employee is a hot topic of conversation everywhere right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you'll see, I'm sure that the investors are going to like demand a higher revenue per employee like very early on. And I think they should. We're not quite there yet in terms of like the broader access to agentic capabilities.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people still have to build them on their own. But I think like what I see like a shift in the next, like, let's say 1 to 3 years is that agent platforms will become a lot more accessible where you don't have to be, have deep PhD level expertise in computer science to build these applications, that you could be an expert in your business. And talk about this concept of like the go-to-market engineer. I think it's going to be a lot more popular over time.
Yeah, I agree. Zach, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks for sharing your insight, man, and looking forward to doing this again.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach.